The federal government plans to translate Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation from public to private ownership just in a matter of months. This is coming barely a day after President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Petroleum Industry Bill into law. Now, within 6 months, the NNPC will become a commercial company, and that is according to the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipre Sylva. Mr. Sylva, who was speaking at a press conference in Abuja, said the transnational committee is already in place to incorporate NNPC Limited. All shares in NNPC Limited are expected to be vested in the government at incorporation and held by the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Sylva noted that although the new Petroleum Act has deregulated the oil sector, subsidy policies will remain in place till further notice. He said an implementation framework for actual deregulation will be established to mitigate the impact on ordinary Nigerians. Meanwhile, some stakeholders in the Niger Delta region seem not to be happy with the passage of the PIB into law. Uchokoro has that story.
The Petroleum Industry Act provides for a legal governance, regulatory and physical framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities and related matters. But some of the enthusiasm the passage of the bill should have elicited is dimmed by the controversies raised over the allocation of 3% revenue to host communities in the Niger Delta, while a fund for the exploration of oil in frontier basins, mostly in northern states, received 30%. This quota was rejected by the Southern Governance Forum and leaders of the South-South region who demanded 10% or in the minimum 5% as earlier passed by the House of Representatives. Addressing some of the concerns raised by Nigerians, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources says the purpose of the PIB is to attract investors to get enough crude oil as possible, as the world is now in the last mile of the oil economy. He argues that the 3% earmarked for host communities is better than 100%, with investors failing to invest in the oil economy, as investors will add the 3% to their operational costs. He notes that the country is in a race to produce as much oil as possible because if it is overtaken by developing global trends, there will be oil but no market for it. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the cost of crude oil production reduced by 5% as market prices crashed, contracts were rationalized, and local manpower had to be employed as expatriates had to return to their countries.
We talk about the 3% in the bill. For us in the Niger Delta, I asked them, 3% of something, is that not better than 100% of what you don't know? What we want to achieve, the philosophy behind this bill, is to attract investors to Nigeria, to produce as much of this crude in the ground as possible. Now, that is what we want to achieve. So, we must measure everything against this philosophy.
As stipulated in the PIB, the NNPC will be incorporated within 6 months by the Ministry of Petroleum and the Ministry of Finance into a limited liability company. The transition process will commence soon. The minister noted that the assent of the PNIB by the president will greatly improve the petroleum industry, and also the ministry is in talks with gas cylinder suppliers to ensure that gas cylinders are affordable to all Nigerians. Celestina Area, TVC News, Abuja.